All right, today we are peeling back the layers on one of the internet's most mysterious tools, Tor. We're going to find out how anonymous browsing actually works. Now, this explainer is based on some really great research from the tech firm Virtualization Options LLC, so let's dive right in. So let me just start by asking you a question. When you're online, browsing, clicking around, do you ever get that feeling that you're being watched? Well, you're not wrong to feel that way. Because whether our activity is truly private has become, one of the biggest questions of our time.
And here's the reality of it. The internet we all use every single day wasn't really built with privacy in mind. Not at all. The moment you connect, your internet service provider, websites, a whole universe of advertisers, they're watching. They're logging what you do, analyzing it, and often selling that digital footprint. That is the problem we're starting with.
So what if you could just browse without leaving all those digital breadcrumbs behind? What would that look like? Well, that's where the solution comes in. And that solution is Tor. So what in the world is Tor? Well, the name itself is the perfect clue. TOR stands for the onion router. And that name is just brilliant because it tells you almost everything. It's free software that plugs you into this huge global network of volunteers, and they all have one goal: to make your internet traffic practically untraceable. And the origin story of Tor is probably not what you're thinking. It didn't start in some hacker's garage. It was actually born in the 1990s, inside the U.S. Naval Research Lab. It was designed to protect American intelligence communications. But then, in the 2000s, it went public as a nonprofit. And by the 2010s, it had become this absolutely essential tool for activists, for journalists, and for pretty much anyone fighting for privacy online. Okay, so that's the what and the why. But how does Tor actually pull off this incredible disappearing act? How does it work? Let's get under the hood and look at the mechanics. The secret sauce here is a technique called onion routing. And it's exactly like the vegetable. The core idea is actually pretty simple. Think of your data, like your request to visit a website, as a tiny message. Onion routing takes that message and wraps it in layer after layer after layer of encryption. So let's follow your data on its journey. First, your browser wraps your request in all those encryption layers. Then, that little data packet is sent out into the Tor network. It gets bounced between at least 3 random computers, which we call relays. And here is the genius part. Each relay only peels back one layer of the onion. The first relay knows that you sent something, but it has no idea where it's ultimately going. The second or middle relay is completely in the dark. It only knows where the data came from and where to send it next. Finally, the last relay, the exit node, peels off the final layer. It sees a destination website, but it has no clue the request originally came from you. So to that website, your request just looks like it came from some random computer on the internet. Your real identity, your IP address, totally hidden. So as you can see, this is an incredibly powerful tool for anonymity. But like any powerful tool, it has massive implications. And they cut both ways. This is where the story gets, a little complicated. And this right here is the central conflict, the core tension of Tor. The very same technology, the very same anonymity that protects the most vulnerable people in the world can also be used to shield the most malicious. The technology itself is neutral. How people use it is anything bad. On one side, Tor is an absolute shield. It's a lifeline for human rights activists in oppressive countries, letting them organize and speak out without being tracked and arrested. It's how whistleblowers can safely get information to the public and how journalists can protect their sensitive sources. For millions of people, it's their only way to get past heavy censorship and see the real, unfiltered internet. But there's the other side of that coin. That same powerful anonymity can create a haven for illegal activity. Tor is the primary way people access the so-called dark web, which hosts marketplaces for illegal goods. It's a tool used by cybercriminals to cover their tracks after an attack, and it can be a platform for things like money laundering or distributing illegal content. So if we put aside those really high-stakes uses for a second, what's the reality of using Tor for just an average person? Let's get practical and look at the real-world trade-offs. So how does Tor compare to something more common like a VPN? Well, with a VPN, you're hiding your activity from your ISP. But you're essentially trusting one single company with all of your data. Tor is totally different. It's decentralized. There's no single point of failure, which gives you much stronger anonymity. But there are big trade-offs. All that bouncing around makes Tor a lot, and I mean a lot, slower. And for security, while your data is encrypted through the network, you have to be aware of a small risk. That final exit node could, in theory, be run by someone malicious.
So yeah, there's a definite price of admission for this level of privacy. First off, speed. All those relays mean things like streaming video are pretty much out of the question. Second, compatibility. Lots of services, especially things like online banking, will just flat out block connections coming from Tor. And finally, you have to remember it is not a magic invisibility cloak. It anonymizes your connection, but you still need to be smart about what you do and what information you share online.
And that really brings us to the fundamental question that a tool like Tor forces us all to think about. We know that real anonymity is possible, but we also know it isn't simple, it isn't always convenient, and it isn't without its own risks. So the real question is, in a world that is always watching, what are you willing to trade for real privacy?